Everything is personal right here. Everything is personal right here.
Ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls, welcome to another episode of Everything is Personal. And today our guest is Stuart Webb. How you doing, Stuart?
Hi there, Glenn. How are you doing?
Good. So I know we're having some power outages. Where are you at right now?
So I'm currently based sort of almost slap bang in the middle of the United Kingdom, near a place called Birmingham, not the Birmingham in Alabama, but what I would probably think is the original one. And I'm about 30 miles north of Birmingham. And I was just saying to you, just as we were about to start recording, my neighbor who has a machine to help her breathe texted me to say, I've just had a text from the power company to say we are going to get a power cut. And just as we started, that's what happened. So hence the sudden reconfiguration of my system in order to be able to talk to you.
Yeah, that's fine. Yeah, I spent some time years ago, back in 1998, in Northampton, England.
Oh, okay.
I lived.
I'm going there tomorrow.
Yeah, it was an interesting place to be. I'll just leave it at that. Also, I got to say that I did not understand what language was being spoken there that well. I thought we all speak English, but I guess we all speak a different dialect of English. I only understood pint, and it was 1998, so it was the World Cup, and that's all I needed.
I can tell you in all honesty, Len, you can get around most of the United Kingdom by saying 3 beers, please, because that's 1 for you and 2 for the people that you just accept. If you can get it.
So I was wondering, we can talk about exactly what you do, but from my understanding and research, just as a leadership coach,
yeah.
How do you help people see like what they can't see in themselves?
So let me wind that back a little bit, because we all have a sort of origin story of how we get to where we are. Mine's a little bit different to some people. So my origin story, where I got to where I am, I was a working scientist for a lot of years. And in fact, I spent a lot of my time working on things to do with DNA. So hence the connection here. And I had a number of people who tried to help me, because one of the things that I probably went not well enough diagnosed in my earlier years, that I have a lot of ADHD and issues focusing, let's put it like that. And so I had a lot of people trying to help me by sort of giving me advice, trying to help me to understand how I best understood myself, best understood how I worked, so that I could sort of assemble the right sort of teams around me. Because one of the things I discovered quite early in my journey, when I left being a working scientist and started working with businesses and started my own businesses, was that I was never going to be able to finish any project on my own. It's just not in my nature. And when you start getting people helping you, and you understand that they're trying not to tell you something, but they're trying to get you to recognize from a question, or recognize from sort of asking you to look at something in a different way, you start to work out they've got a process and they're doing it in a particular way. So one of the things I've absorbed from that, one of the things I've now understood, is that the greatest skill that we often have is to ask the right question. Now, I've gone through training, I've done some psychology and things like that now, that enable me to understand that it's the right question that you ask at the right time that helps somebody to start the process of thinking they need to do to recognize that what they're doing is not necessarily going to end in the outcome that they're looking for. So it was watching other people try and help me by asking the questions that I now find myself asking, that really led me to understand how it is that you help other people. Because you can go to them with a solution, and it is the very worst thing you can do, because they won't accept it. They may not be receptive to it. They may not want to be receptive to the outcome that you're telling them it will produce, because it's not their lived experience. So you basically have to get them to recognize it from themselves. And you've got to guide them to the place where they start to understand that.
So what's an example or maybe a few of the best questions that you can ask someone?
So let me give you a great one that was asked for me. Well, what was it you were intending to do there? And that's one that I would like, well, it was obvious, wasn't it? I mean, I went into that meeting, we needed this outcome, well, we didn't get it, but that's not my fault. And somebody asked me several times, well, what is it you were actually attempting to do? And you go, well, I was trying to do this. And then, of course, you go into well, okay, at what point did you recognize it wasn't going the way that you expected? And you think, well, not till the end. And so therefore, they sort of guided me to, well, should you be looking for what signal effectively, or what flow, what was the thing that should recognize? What was the thing that you should recognize that made you think it's not going the right direction earlier, so that you can correct? So those were the three questions that I got asked quite a lot when I was younger, that I now do an awful lot of asking myself. What was the outcome you were looking for? Because that clearly didn't come out of the meeting, or didn't come out of the situation we've just had.
So I'm curious about this whole thing of what, right? Like, so when people ask me what are you, like, as you just said, what are you trying to accomplish? What is your goal? What is your actual goal? And it's like peeling back the layers of the artichoke, or the onion, or whatever analogy we want to use. But the one thing that I find to be even more profound, allows me to kind of think and consider, is why am I doing this in the first place? Why do I want to do that? So it allows me to sort of connect to the outcome, and then the what kind of takes more shape, or greater shape, when you understand the reasoning behind that. Do you see that there's a combination of the what are you doing and the why are you doing that sort of connects?
Yeah, absolutely. And one of the ways in which I was taught how to ask the why question, if you like, was the fact that somebody once said to me, you have to ask why 5 times. If you ask it just once, you get the superficial because. And the why at that point is you haven't really reached the why. And they said, if you've asked the question why 5 times, now you don't always, I know you can annoy people, can't you? You can sort of say, well, why? And you begin to sound like the baby that, I always used to have in my family. Well, I've got one downstairs at the moment who I would describe as a why baby, because he'd say, don't do that. And he'd go, why? And that would be really annoying. But the fact of the matter is, if you as a coach or a mentor or something like that, you're asking why, but you go, okay, why did you do that? Or now you were trying to do this. How do you think it didn't quite work out? It's why, but in a different way. I've always been told that if you ask that five times, you eventually get to the actual root cause. And it's the 5th why that normally people sort of go, oh, wait a minute, the light bulb, I can get it. So you use the combination of, well, what was the outcome you're looking for? Right. Why did you take that path? Well, because this seemed the right way. Well, what made you think that would be the right thing? And you ask that why question in slightly subtle ways until eventually somebody goes, well, that's the way I've always done it. Or I've seen my dad do it like that. Or I watched so-and-so do it like that. And you go, okay, so you're modeling a behavior, and that behavior may not be right for you, but also it might have been a poor behavior to model. And that's the time at which you can bring in the intervention of, let's look at this in a different way.
Yeah, I love what you just said. Also, not to keep asking, because I was the why guy. That was I was the kid, always why. But it gets annoying. So if you can find a different angle to ask why, it's not just, well, why? You're coming from a different angle. It allows people to look at it, the reasoning from a different way. I want to go back. You started with the origin story, so I want to take it back a little bit further. Where did you grow up?
So I grew up in a place that's down in the southwest of the United Kingdom, down a place called Bristol, and we moved to just outside of Birmingham when I was a young lad, 8 years old, and I then did most of my schooling, schooling there. And you know, some of that move, actually, you look back now and you recognize things that happened during that. I was very close to a grandparent that when my family moved away from them, I missed them. And so I think there were things that made me, it upset some of the schooling a little bit.
What were your parents together, and do you have siblings?
Yeah, it was. Yeah, I have two sisters, and my dad moved us basically for his work, and so we moved away.
So I mean, you talked about, you know, having sort of a sciencey type of a mindset, but as a kid, were you into science? Were you into sports? Like, were you always science minded?
Yeah. So there were two things that sort of dominated my life, and still do to a very large extent. Although the third one sort of, I was always outside, out riding bikes, and I eventually became a competitive cyclist when I was younger. And the other thing, I could not. I was from a very young age. I had the science brain. You probably sort of aware that there's a golfer at the moment called Bryson DeChambeau. He's known as the scientist because he would always he's doing some really interesting things. Like he floats his golf ball in water to find out which side is heaviest and which side is lightest. This is a guy that questions everything. I was like that when I was a kid. I had theories about the fact that all liquids had to contain water because it was the only way that everything would be a liquid. And, you know, many years later, I'd learned that wasn't true. But I can remember at 5 years old telling my grandmother that was why things flowed, was because everything that flowed contained water. And she looked at me as if to say, I've got no idea what he's talking about, but I'm going to have to accept it because I can't take it and say anything different. So that was me from a very young age. And obviously, as I went through school, basically my teacher sort of turned around and said, you need to go to medical school. And that was sort of set on my path for me. And I sort of believed that was what I had to do.
Well, setting a path to go to medical school, was it the reason to help people, like to be a doctor? Like, I'm going to help people with their diseases? Or was it more about, I'm going to be in the lab looking through a microscope, trying to decide, you know, what bacteria, what this and that, it can be, you know, improved for mankind? Was there, you know, a dual path in medicine?
Yeah, so that was the problem. It was just sort of, you know, it was sort of, you know, you need to go to medical school. But actually, as I started to think about it, I didn't actually really like sick people. So it was going to be a poor choice. And so somebody eventually sort of sat me down and went, well, perhaps you should take a research route rather than just sort of plain, you know, you're a scientist, but if you don't really like people, or you don't like sick people, being a doctor is not a great choice for you. So why don't you start thinking? So it was at that point somebody said to me, you need to take a research route. And I had a very definite route that I wanted to study DNA. I wanted to study how genes within cells are turned on and off. And I went for my interview to my university, and I told this professor that sat me down, I didn't know who he was. Yeah. And I told him about, you know, I wanted to study this, and I was really keen on it, and I was desperately interested in trying to find out why certain genes got turned on at certain times and certain. And he sort of looked vaguely interested. He was sort of a bit, you know, he just asked me a few questions, and then I sort of disappeared off. And I got a very good, we have something in the UK, you have to get a certain number of grades in order to be able to get into the university that you want to. And I looked at the offer that I got, and I went, I can't believe that I can't fail. I cannot fail to get in with what they've offered me. And when I got there, I discovered he was a world leading expert on this particular subject. And I was trying to teach him something that he probably thought, well, he's keen and enthusiastic, but he knows absolutely nothing. But we'll bring him into the university and try and teach him something. So you learn very quickly not to try and school those people who genuinely do know better than you.
Yeah, but you wouldn't know that because you didn't ask him.
I didn't. I had no idea.
Why. You didn't ask him the why.
Absolutely no idea who he was.
just because I'm sort of fascinated with genetics as well. It's been
Yeah,
sort of
yeah.
a passion of mine for many years. You know, I just think that people don't understand genetics as a whole, and I'm not even talking about epigenetics. Uh, when people like I talk to doctors all the time, the ones that actually not PhDs, the ones that actually deal with patients. And they said they had a genetics class somewhere in medical school, but that's it. They don't really focus on that. And I find it a little bit alarming and disturbing that medical professionals don't study all the body, including like
Mm,
systems
mm,
like the endocannabinoid system, understand the genetic predispositions and understand the recommendations that they make to their patients may actually turn on or off an expression. So how do you not look at that? So I'm just curious that maybe in UK it's different. I don't know. My perspective is US based, but actually my company is global. So we talk to people all over the world, and there is a pattern. Some countries like Iceland, for instance, they require all the people in Iceland to get their DNA test, and they bank it. But I don't know if the doctors do anything different with the genetics or not. So I was just wondering where this passion came from, and then what you learned in your research, and we'll talk about the transition. But I'm just curious what you learned in this genetic and epigenetic kind of expression, and why is it so important?
So yeah, I think it's really fascinating that what you've just said, actually. Then, and let me just say two things. One of which is, things are moving so quickly nowadays. I think we're only just beginning to scratch the surface. I mean, I get hay fever, and I was actually trying to dive into sort of why do we end up and why do we see people who have particular food allergies and things like that. It is still, even in 2025, a mystery as to how something like that works. And we're only just beginning to understand the fact that, as I was saying, I can remember when I first started my research career, we were talking about sort of, wouldn't it be great once we have sequenced the human genome, we'll understand it. Well, it was only after we'd sequenced the human genome that we realized, once again, we'd only just scratched the surface, because now you get the epigenetics. You said that the after the DNA has been made, after things have been as DNA in a cell ages, you get changes to that which actually sort of give huge changes to your offspring and things like that, which we didn't even begin to think was going to happen. Now, what worries me a little bit about all of this is that sometimes a doctor is trained by a doctor who went through training and was trained by a doctor. Some of the practices that are passed down can be 50, 60 years old because it's always been done this way. And it's very difficult to come along and start saying, as we're talking about now, personalized medicine. If you have a better understanding of the DNA, then you can make an mRNA vaccine to a particular cancer. Now, that is something which is very new, very, very difficult to actually sort of try and do. It's very expensive to do. So it becomes something which is very difficult to actually get people to look at and go, this should become normal. So I think a lot of the time, one of the things that happens is, and it works in business as well as in science, you get this ingrained, we've always done it this way thinking. And that, I think, is where good scientists who are able to communicate have such an impact, because by being good at communication, people suddenly go, oh, there might be something in this. It might be worth listening to this. And so often it's that moment of the light bulb going off. Oh, wait a minute. Somebody's explained it at long last in a way which makes me think I can sort of understand it, that allows them to go, yeah, it's worth looking to in more detail. But it is back to that communication.
Yeah, I mean, it's absolutely key. There are so many brilliant scientists that lack the ability to express. They're good
Yeah.
at maybe writing papers and publishing, and they have citations and peer-reviewed essays, but to be able to convey that, that's the difficulty. So In your research and your career path, was there like a mentor, or was there a moment, or was there something that happened in your career that said, you know what, I now need to kind of shift a little bit and maybe give back and help people
So I
realize
think,
the things that I learned along the way.
yeah, so I think we're all very fortunate in this, isn't it? I mean, you often find that mentors come along at the time you need them. And so there were three. There was the guy that helped me and really set me on the path that I sort of talked about in terms of my university career. Alan, who actually sort of sat me down one day and said, "Don't do this. This is something that you're clearly interested in. Focus on that." And he pointed me in the right direction to start my research career. And he really sort of helped me to straighten out my thinking. Then there was the guy that I spent my years doing research with, Roger, who once again was a tremendous sort of, this is the way you have to think sort of person. He really sort of straightened out my thinking. And it was after that period that I came across somebody that really sort of took me out of that and into my my first business, Craig, who just looked at me one day when I first joined his business, and he said, "You young man, you young man, need to get." He'd set up a business. It was a very interesting business, but he said, "You young man, go set up your own business. You're going to be frustrated being an employee." And I looked at him and I thought, and he helped me over a year to sort of transition out of sort of, I just started sort of, leaving my academic life. And he went, "You've got to go and set up your own business. You are frustrated, and I can see you have ideas, and I can see that you're going to be on that." And he pushed me. He basically pushed me out the door. I could have sat in his company and sort of ridden on his coattails, but he kicked me out. And he told me the most important thing. He said, "You're a scientist." He said, "You think like a scientist, and you must remember the story of the bumblebee. That aerodynamically, a bumblebee shouldn't fly. But what it does is it puts its head down, flaps its wings, and gets on with the job." And that was his advice to me. And I remember it to this day. And he pushed me out the door of his business and said, "Right, go start your own business. And tell me if you need any help from me." And I looked at him like, "Craig, you've got to be kidding me." And he went, "No, go do it." And he was absolutely right.
I love that story. I love the bumblebee sort of example. There's a lot of people who are probably thinking right now, I don't want to do my 9 to 5. I know I have things that I can offer, and working for somebody, it really doesn't suit me, but I'm scared. No, I'm scared to make this choice because what if I fail? So what is like transitioning out from an academic to a business person? What were some of the things that you went through mentally? And then how did you decide, like, this is what I want to do and this is my foray into business?
So let me put it like this to you, Len. Choosing to stay where you are is still a choice, because you've got to give up the opportunity to do something else. So whatever you do, if you decide to leave your business or if you decide to stay as an employee, you're missing out on one of the two paths. And then if you choose to leave your employer and start your own business, and that doesn't work, you can choose to carry on trying, or you can choose to go back to an employee. So you're always going to be giving up on one of them. So for me, one of the things that I learned fairly early on was the fact that a choice is being made even if you don't think you're making a choice. If you're standing still, you're making a choice to stand still. And so I was pushed early to make choices. Now, the difficulty that I discovered is that sometimes you think, as a scientist, I want to gather all the data I possibly can to make the best choice. And that data isn't always available. You've just got to go with your gut. And it was somebody that basically, I think, sort of, once again, another one of these moments of Craig, I think it was, who sat down with me. He said, "Look, get it into the 20 to 80 range, and then go with your gut, because you are never going to get 100%. If it's 0, you'll make a bad choice. If it's 100, you'll never get there. So get somewhere in the range and just go with it, because you're always making a choice, and that choice will always be giving up on one or two of the other options available. So for me, I've gone with that particular sort of mentality for a while now. I know if I've got no information whatsoever, I'm going to make a bad choice. I'm never going to get to 100, which is where I would probably feel comfortable. So I've got to get it into the 20 to 80 range and go with my gut.
How do you make a decision, or how did you make a decision that this is what I would like to do? Was there a exercise that you went through? Was it a combination of things, or was it, what do I have in me that I think that I can make the biggest contribution to in the world? What was your mindset back then?
So my mindset was, I probably was too, some people would say arrogant, others would say too pig-headed, to realize that actually I was wrong. And actually some of the stuff that I was doing and saying was wrong, but I didn't recognize it as wrong. I just thought, look, I think this is worthwhile trying. And so that's where I went with it. Now, I probably am one of those people. We're all, as entrepreneurs, we are all hugely optimistic. We genuinely believe that everything we say, think, and do that comes out of our mouth is brilliant, and there is absolutely no possibility of it ever failing. And that probably is, it should be tempered occasionally. But I was always absolutely convinced that, there were better ways of doing things, and I was going to go find them.
And then, so how did you, from what you learned in your entrepreneurial journey, how did you decide that I'm going to utilize a lot of these things and then help other people, find their journey?
So that's when my second business, with first business started, Craig pushed me out the door and said, go start a business. And two of the people from his business, Ben and I, went off and we started this business. And it was okay. We grew it and sold it. When I started the second business, it was the one that I really wanted to scale properly. Mm-hmm. And I discovered that it was chaos, and I was too chaotic. And by this stage, I'd been out of scientific thinking, or out of being a scientist now, for about 6 years. And it was one afternoon I was sitting there thinking, why is it so difficult to make this thing work the way I know it should work? And what I had was this revelation of sort of, wait a minute, a few years ago, if I was planning an experiment, I would work out all the parameters. I would make a system so I knew exactly if it worked, how I could repeat it. And if I wanted to make a change, I'd only change one thing at a time, because it would get too chaotic if I didn't. Now, why am I not doing that in this business? Why am I making a different decision every day? Why am I changing things around? Why am I setting up things one day and then setting it up in a different way tomorrow? And it was one of those moments when, hang on a minute, I'm going to re-import all of that thinking, set up standards and systems and processes, and basically we're going to work this thing. And once it's working properly, I'm only going to change one thing to make sure that I can keep repeating it. And suddenly things started to work and things started to scale. And I imported that into the next business that I went into. And as I was in that third business, I was looking around and thinking, there are people here that don't think like this. I've got to get out there and tell them, because that's why they're stressed. That's why the chaos exists in their business. That's why they're unable to just enjoy the journey, and it's harming them. So I thought, time to try and get out and try and tell people that having a structure, having process, is actually not as bad an idea as you might imagine, because that's how I managed to get my success. Now, obviously, some people didn't have all of the scientific training that I had, and therefore you've got to take them back to, I now talk to people who are, in marketing and say, tell me about the marketing experiments you run. And they look at me as if I'm talking a foreign language. But, a marketing experiment is very similar to many other experiments. So often what happens in a marketing experiment is you're changing 16 things and going, I don't know which one of those I needed to change. But when I run a marketing experiment, I don't just do A/B testing nowadays with someone. some of my people that I work with, we do ABCDE testing. We have 5 things going on, but it's controlled. We'll only change one step and we'll test 5 of them, and then we'll move on. And once we've standardized that, we go on and we do the next thing. But if you're changing 16 things all at once, it's very difficult to work out which one is right. So I now am convinced, by trying to help people to understand the science of business and the science of marketing, you will get a better outcome.
I love that whole science of business approach, because I have a sciencey mind, not being a scientist, but I try to implement that into my business. And not everybody's comfortable with the scientific method of doing business, but that's exactly the right approach, at least in my experience. I wanted to ask you about noise. And what I mean by that is, there is so much noise about technology, for instance.
Yeah.
There's so many that use this, use that, and you go to Reddit groups and you go and how do you kind of navigate throughout all the noise to help your clients make informed decisions about technology to use and tools, etc.?
Yeah, and once again, we come back to that. I often say to somebody, we were talking about it just now, what is the outcome you're looking for? Because, I was having a discussion with somebody only today, and they were saying, well, I know that if I use AI, this will produce the result I want. And okay, how do you know that? What's the outcome you're actually looking for? And of course, we got down to what the actual outcome is. And I go, okay, now we know what we're aiming at. We can set up the right sort of experiment in order to get to that point. So yes, this tool and that tool might work because we know that that's the outcome we want. It's back to the simple stuff again. When I was trying to do a scientific experiment, I was trying to test and see what my outcome was. I had an idea. In science, it's what we call the null hypothesis. We set out to prove our hypothesis. And so therefore, I actually say to people, what is the hypothesis? What's the business outcome you're looking for? And it is back to some very simple stuff, because so often people are going, I can remember I had one guy that worked for me and he said, I just want to see action because action tells me things are moving forward. And I went, no, sometimes action is telling you it's going round and round in circles. And one of those directions is backward, and I don't want the backward anymore. I want you to tell me where you want to get to and what steps you're going to take to get to that. And try to sort of to get him to rethink his, I just want to see action because action makes me feel better.
So Stuart, walk me through an engagement, like, a potential client, a company, or an individual will contact you. What would be the type of engagement? What would you do with that individual or company?
So I'm just in the process actually of doing something like that with a new client at the moment. So we've met. Now I'm at the stage now where I'm talking about things I'm talking about. So either when we sort of start talking, we understand each other, or they basically turn around and go, you're a complete nutcase, I'm out of here. So that's the first thing. We have a short.
So you got past the nutcase phase, and now
I have on this occasion got past the complete nutcase.
All right.
So the next thing that we normally always do is we start with that. What are you actually trying to get to? Where are you trying to go? Now, with this particular business, one of the things that I'm doing with them is I'm going to be. They're trying to get some investment. And so we've got to work out what the business case is. So I've started with a simple, let's just have a 3 or 4 meetings around the board table where we're trying to work out what it is we're all on the same page about. So we've got the whole board all working together. So we're trying to work out what it is we're trying to do together. Once we've got that, we can set a plan out. And so with this particular group, we've got together, we've agreed what it is we're all trying to work on. And now we're setting up what are the steps we have to take in order to get to that outcome? So we need to get some information. We need to gather some information in this. Let's go gather that information. Once we've got that information, we need to do some analysis. And once we've done some analysis, and then we'll we'll use that in order to write our business case. So normally it starts with a conversation. Then we have a short amount of time where we actually work out what it is that we're trying to achieve together. And then I put together the plan which will take us to that outcome.
Have you had clients that are really resistant to change and they have these blocks in the way? And if that's the case, how do you help them to overcome the obstacles that they put in their own way that you are aware that are impeding their success or next step
Yeah.
of the journey?
Yeah, I have, Len. And, once again, it comes down to trying to get them to understand from the outsider's point of view, asking those questions to say, well, you must recognize that this thing isn't actually going to get the result that you were looking for because and getting to it. So change is difficult for all of us. Change is something that none of us wants to go through because we're comfortable. We like being where we are, but unfortunately, change is if you the world outside your little bubble of you is changing all the time, and if you're not keeping up, you're effectively going backwards. So one of the things you have to do is you sort of have to sort of put that mirror up and get people to recognize that by standing still, they are going backwards. So you have to get them to sort of confront you're trying to get here. If you want to stay still, you've got to be moving anyway. So you'd spend time trying to reflect to them and trying to get them to answer the question, what is it that I'm not seeing? And so therefore, I'm trying to get them to look at it as if they're an outsider and getting them to sort of to think about how would an outsider see me if they were looking in and I was that outsider. So you're asking questions in such a way that you get them to understand what it is other people are seeing, so they start to understand their own intransigence to an effect.
Yeah, I think it's extremely important to hold up a mirror, and I think
Yeah.
people get too complacent and comfortable in their space, and when they have people around them that keep telling them certain things that are within the circle or in the bubble, it reinforces the state of being comfortable. You have to learn how to be comfortable being uncomfortable. And one of the best ways to do that is bring in, an outside source that can say, I don't have those preconceived notions. I'm coming from the outside.
And one of the things that I'm often challenging business executives about is they bring in people that think like them. I was talking to one a couple of weeks back now, and I was saying that all of the people that they're surrounded by think like them. I know there's a lot of noise at the moment about sort of diversity, but having a diverse set of thoughts, having other people saying, no, think like this, isn't a source of conflict and isn't bad. It's a source of another view. Now, you can choose to ignore it, but you should at least hear it before you choose to ignore it. So I was saying to Claire, she has got a group around her who all think exactly like her. And it makes her feel really comfortable. But what it's not doing is helping her to make the right decision, because she needs somebody who's going to come up with a completely different view and say, no, I think we should do this. And at least then go, oh, okay, I'm going to choose not to do it. We come back to the choices, but at least I've heard it.
Yeah, and it's a challenge, and you want to be challenged because
absolutely
it's that little bit of a push that everybody needs. And you're absolutely right. You can choose not to move forward with it, but at the very least, maybe there's new neurons that are created just by having that conversation. So I definitely agree with you on that. I wanted to talk to you about, like, you brought up an example previously that the company you're involved with, consulting and coaching is going out and going to need some funding. So I was wondering, you being a connector as well, like, what should a company really like? What are the fundamental things that a company needs to have in place prior to going out and getting funding? is it more or less, the C-suite having a vision in place? Is it having a really good plan? Is it a combination of all those? Or at the end of the day, is it an untangible just because you have a personal connection? They like you, they believe in you. Like, have you seen any patterns in your experience with that?
It's a difficult one, isn't it? Yeah, I've seen a number where um, uh, I think there are a combination of things. So what I'm gonna say is often money is given over to people who have a great vision. The challenge then is to build a team that can implement that vision. And very often there are people who have brilliant vision, and they can see a tremendous future, and it's very difficult for them to build a team in order to be able to sort of take that and turn it into a reality. And so often I've seen funding where they go, I'd just love to see the team behind this person actually be capable of turning what they're talking about into something. And so therefore you've got to make sure that you have the right team, and it has to have the level of tension within the team where there are, different voices, so that you do get that sort of, if you've got a bunch of yes people around you, you will not get that. So I've seen the need for a great team, the need for a great vision. But then, plans are useful, but often the problem with a plan is somebody tries to stick slavishly to it. And one of the things that I've said to people just recently is they put a lot of effort into a really great plan, and then they turn around and go, but nobody was prepared to lend us the money. And I go, the plan was too rigid, because you've got to recognize that part of what's going to happen is the minute you start to hit the market, things will change. And you didn't demonstrate your ability to say, when this happens, we've got other plans, we've got ways of reacting. We will start to actually maneuver this and use the plan as a way of saying to ourselves, we were headed in that direction. We come back to the sort of scientist in me again. We were headed in this direction. The market has told us we need to be over here. We can choose to continue going down this direction because we believe in the vision, or we can flip and we can go this way. And I've seen a couple of people recently who didn't get the funding they wanted because they were continuing down this path and they were determined to go down this path. And they were basically asked the question, but what if? And they go, it's not going to matter. We're going to go this way. You have to have a certain level of humility, which just says we could be wrong. The market could take us in a different direction, and we'll be flexible, and we'll flip. We'll go down the route. So therefore it's a combination of trying to say, yeah, we've got a plan, but we're not going to stick slavishly to the plan. The plan is our guide. And as soon as that guide no longer serves us, we'll go with another guide and we'll make another decision.
Yeah.
And you have to be prepared.
I think what you're saying is completely on point from a executive standpoint. Who's actually an entrepreneur is creating this, they need to have contingencies in place, especially, if the people believe that they're starting out and there's a straight line.
Yeah.
Right? So you start and you're going to end up, you ask them a question, where do you want to be? Where do you want to end up? Here. But it doesn't mean that you're going to start from here and go there. It could be zigzag. It can be all kinds of different ways. And they're not prepared for that. But even when you prepare the entrepreneur, actually like yourself, who had multiple exits, who've learned from their, experiences and mistakes and all these other things, the funding, the venture capital, the banking, family offices, we need to work on both sides, because when they say, give me your deck, give me your 3 or 5 year projections. Well, if you guys and women, everybody knows that that's a bunch of bullshit. It doesn't mean anything, because tomorrow things can change with AI and everything else. It's changing rapidly every single moment. So I don't know if you have an answer for this. I'm just kind of we're just shooting the shit over a beer in a pub, but I'm just curious on your opinion of this because at some point we both need to come to a realization that 3-year projections and PowerPoint decks presentations, they really can only go so far. I think it's having a conversation, and then it's a gatekeeper, right? So, oh, your deck is not good enough. You need to hire somebody that does better graphics. Oh, I need to get my CFO to create better projections. All these things are changing so rapidly that I think we need to have a better conversation sitting at a table and saying, what do you want to do? Why do you want to do it? And how are you going to get there? And if there's a roadblock, what are you going to do about that thing?
Yeah.
So,
and you know, great example, Lennon. There was a group that I was working with just recently. They got a small amount of money, and they went out with their first product. Basically, what the market, their customers turned around and said, "That's great, but we really want something slightly different." And they took that on board. Customers are, particularly in early stages, customers are a huge and really brilliant way of getting feedback. If you get out a really, they call it the minimum viable product. They don't spend all of your time gold plating and putting this thing so that it becomes brilliant. And I keep telling people things like Airbnb. Airbnb had a basic website with you could book a house like this. I didn't have the house. You said, yeah, I'd like to book that one. And they immediately went out and tried to find one that was close. And then they'd come back to the customer and go, well, we found you with this one. It's similar to that. And people will go, yeah, that's good enough. So that way you start to learn what it is your customers actually want. So I was working with a guy recently who has got an absolutely fantastic product. But the problem is, and he's taken it out into the market, and the market is immediately turned around and said, could you just do this? And he looked at me and he said, but that's not what I wanted to do. And I said, but that's what the market's asking for. That's where you're going to get your biggest bang for your buck. That is, the big growth lever that we've been looking for is that one. So let's pull that one and pull it hard. And his answer to me was, I don't know, because I really was looking for this. And I went, yeah, but the market is telling you. So let's pull that growth lever hard. Let's go and start doing that, because that's what these guys are asking you for. And too often, people, don't put the minimum viable product out soon enough in order to get that feedback. And then when they do get the feedback, they look at it and go, it doesn't seem right. Now, let me just go back once again to my scientific career, because I can remember doing once, it was the thing that actually sort of stuck my name up in lights for a while. I did this experiment and I took it to my very, very experienced co-collaborator. And I said, I've done the experiment and this is the result. And she said to me, it doesn't look right. That wasn't what I was expecting. Now, that's where I think a lot of very experienced business people and a lot of starters go, I wasn't expecting that. So therefore I doubt it. I basically proved to this scientist that what I'd done as an experiment proved the point, because I'd done the experiment right. So if you do the experiment right in business and you take it to the market and the market tells you yay or nay, believe the market, don't believe your gut. We go back to don't believe what you were dreaming of, because if you've done the experiment right and the market gives you this result, take the result.
Yeah, it's a really good point. Maybe it's a combination of both, because some people are so rigid and they lack humility that they are in ego, operating in ego. And if the market tells them this is the way we want it, you feel that you know better. However, there may be some people that you can take some feedback, still have your vision go with your gut, and maybe say, you know what, I'll take it, but I still feel that there's an opportunity for me to pursue the vision the way I see it. So I guess it's an individual thing with every single opportunity.
And we come back to every choice means that one of them has to die. So maybe you go with your original and it becomes a success. Well, that's I can never prove to you going with the other alternative would have been a greater one because you didn't take it.
Yeah.
So you're always turning down one opportunity or the other.
Yeah, you're making a choice, free will. So I have some questions I ask all my
Oh,
guests.
sure.
Sort of a shift, music related stuff. So I'm curious if you remember, what was the very first concert that you ever attended?
So the very first concert I ever attended was it was back in my university days. It was 1981, and it was somebody called Lisa Stansfield.
Oh, lovely Stampsville. Yeah, very good. Okay, what was the last concert that you attended?
The last concert I'd attended, I went to. It's something that's it's in London at the moment.
Yeah.
It's called ABBA Voyage. It's ABBA but in holograms, and it's an ABBA concert where they look like they looked 30 years ago, which is quite unnerving because I've aged and they haven't, and that doesn't feel right. But it's a holographic experience. It's
There'll be a Stuart holograph
I hope not. I hope not.
You and Lisa Stansfield singing "All Around the World." What was that song? All Around the World, right? Is that how it goes? Yeah, that'd be great.
Yeah. But yeah, no. So that was a few months back in January, and was quite an experience. So it was like a concert, but not like a concert.
That's interesting. Okay, another music question. For the next year, you can only listen to 5 albums. You don't have to remember the name of the actual album. You got them down? All right.
There's first.
Rumors?
One of the first CDs I ever bought, and I still listen to it now. I don't know what
if you don't mind, Stuart, can you actually say what it is? Because
it's Fleetwood Mac Rumors. It's Fleetwood Mac Rumors, and it has got things like Songbird and The Chain and You Make Loving Fun. Now I know they were going through some real tough times when they made the album, but hey, they produced some music on that album. So
one of the biggest selling albums of all time. If I'm not mistaken.
Yeah. Then this one, which it's Huey Lewis and the News, and it's their album 4. I have no idea why, but it just makes my heart, it just makes me feel better. So that's the second one. Okay, the third one on the list. This got me through a particularly tough examination at university. It's Dire Straits' Communicate. And I just love Mark Knopfler's guitar, if I'm being honest.
It's one of the greatest of all time, for sure. Way under.
Next one, Mike Oldfield, Tubular Bells. Why? Because I am in awe of a man who can make tubular bells sound good.
It's a fantastic ambience, really beautiful album.
How you could make tubular bells actually sound good. And this is another one that got me through a really tough. Well, this was the breakup of a girlfriend that I thought was going to be the one. It's Chicago, and If You Leave Me Now. She wasn't right for me, but at the time it felt like she was. So I spent many evenings crying to that one. I'd still listen to it now, but just to dream of the one that got away. So those are the 5.
Love that. I love that you had the props. You're the first person on the show, I think, that actually had the albums in hand to show. So I love that. It's beautiful.
What's really sad is some of those are vinyl and some of them are CD. And I bet you, I have shown them to some of the younger people that I'm working with at the moment, and they look at the vinyl and they go, "Is that original?" And you say, "Yeah, I'm afraid I'm that old. They're an original one. It's not one that's been re-released. It's an original one."
It's interesting because so I used to work for Tower Records way back in the day. For those of you who don't know, it's a big record store. Was global at some point. So I was there in the transition where vinyl was transitioned to CD. So I had vinyl, but I started getting everything on CD. So 7,000 CDs. and CDs are sort of nobody really listens to. So I started repurchasing
Yeah.
all my CDs on vinyl. So now I have a pretty large vinyl collection until CDs are back. So I'm
And
renting those out as well.
but do you know, I can remember the first time that I played Rumors on CD to this day, because I thought, oh, I've worn the record out because there are bits about that song I can now rehear that I hadn't heard in several years. So, you know, there are some disadvantages to vinyl. We do wear them out if we play them a lot.
There's still a certain thing about vinyl that hits my ear differently than the CD. It's too clean. I love clean sound sometimes, but sometimes when I sit down, on my couch, put on a record and I hear the crackle, there's an emotional connection to that. So maybe
Yeah, there is.
maybe it's
There
an
is.
age. I don't know.
There is an emotional connection.
So final question. Please describe what your room looked like growing up.
So you might imagine from a kid who had the dreams I had, it was covered in posters to do with the solar system, the periodic table, and it had a board. I can remember there was a board at the end of my bed where I was putting up race times, because at the time I was competing and I would be writing up my race times each week and trying to go through what had happened that week when I was training, to see what I'd done in order to get either quicker or slower, and trying to do the experiment of how I could get a little bit quicker with each one of those trials. So I had a very regimented training schedule, plus times, plus all sorts of things to do with that.
Love it. So where can people contact you? Where can they find out more about your work or social or anything else you want to share?
Yeah, so you'll find me on LinkedIn. I'm LinkedIn.com. Just look for Stuart Webb. I seem to be known as just Stuart Webb. The website, if you want to go to the website, you'll find me at Systemize, SYSTIME, SYSTEMISE.me, and you'll find me there. There's free stuff. There's all sorts of stuff there, and a link to the blog where you'll find I write, and a contact me form.
Great. Yeah, we'll link to all that stuff when we
Systemize.me.
Systemize me. Got it. And for my audience, don't forget to like, subscribe, share. Thank you so much for all the wonderful comments. I mean, they've been coming in, not just like the reviews, the stars, but just the feedback has been tremendous, and I'm so grateful for that. And thank you for buying my book, Making Cannabis Personal, on Amazon. I appreciate that as well. Stuart, I want to thank you so much. Thank you for staying up and doing this and overcoming the technical challenges with the electricity and all that stuff. But thank you so much. I really enjoyed you.
Len, it's been really fun. I'm so pleased to have been able to have the conversation. Thank you for having me. It's been a wonderful conversation.
Great. All right. Take care. Cheers. Hey, everyone. So does anybody know what greening out means? I've been the recipient of so many calls over the years of people greening out. That means they took too much THC and had an adverse reaction. So I always recommend other things, but nothing really concrete. Now I can. There's a solution. It is called Antidose. Antidose.com is quick. It's rapid. It works immediately, safe, and effective. So I love my props. If you are toasty or you are burnt, that's the difference. Now, I also love the 1 gummy, 2 gummy, 3 gummy floor. So just be aware, very narrow therapeutic window. You know exactly what you can take now. if you've taken too much. Once again, it's Antidose at antidose.com. Get yours today. Hey everyone, thank you for watching and listening. And don't forget to hit the subscribe button, share this episode, and hit that bell. Like, comment. I so appreciate that. And check me out on social under Len May or Len May DNA. Find out more on LinkedIn or lenmaycoaching.com. And remember, everything is personal.